Welcome to Wine for Normal People, the podcast for people who like wine, but not the snobbery that goes with it. I'm your host, Elizabeth Schneider, author of the Wine for Normal People book and certified wine dork.
And I'm MC Ice, just a wine-loving normal person.
This podcast is sponsored by Wine Spies, winespies.com/normal to get more information and great deals on wines. Upon reflecting about this podcast, I realized that it was extra special for me. I was able to record live with Giovanni Correggia of Matteo Correggia in Roero, a part of the Piedmont in Italy that I love and that I try to champion as much as possible. You may have heard the Roero podcast where I really talk about my passion for the area. I met Giovanni several years ago. I loved his wines and his family story. This podcast is so many things all at once. It's a great education on the Roero region by the most famous producer there. It's the story of a grape that was reborn in this place, arnaze, which is probably the grape that you're familiar with if you know Roero. It's a lesson in the politics of the Piedmont and how some simple choices have brought fame to Barolo and Barbaresco and kind of kept Roero down. They also make fantastic Nebbiolo. Bet you didn't know that. A fascinating family story that includes a talented champion of Roero. Horrible tragedy, the triumph of a widow, Ornella, who had nothing to do with wine, and her unbelievable strength of character and perseverance for the legacy of her kids. And then the current generation, Giovanni, with his shining positivity, his amazing vision, maturity, promise of a great future for the Correggia family and its wines. I truly love the wines of Matteo Correggia, and I believe that the Nebbiolo he makes are the exact styles of wines that so many of us love. There's elegance, minerality, balance, none of the heaviness or the big tannins that we sometimes get from Barolo, which can take years and years to be drinkable. The arnaze, it goes without saying, is a white for the ages. It's a minerally, floral, saline wine with serious gravity. The Barbera also has a lighter touch growing on these sandy soils. And Giovanni's Brachetto, if you have an opportunity to taste it, is as tasty as he describes also. It's such a unique grape, a clone only found in Roero. I have to say that in interviewing Giovanni and then in editing the show, I laughed and I teared up so many times. I felt indignant on his behalf, also triumphant. I hope the conversation we had evokes the same emotions in you. If nothing else, it's a great story and a great education on an underestimated region. So here's the show. Giovanni, thank you for being here. It only took me, 2.5 years to get you on the show? There is nobody better to talk about Roero than you. So let's use the places that people might know to talk about where Roero is. Talk about where it is in relation to Barbaresco and Barolo, and then we'll get into the geology and why it's so different.
Yes, it's an honor to be here. So first of all, Roero region, we're in Italy, in Piedmont, in northwest Italy, right, very close to the French borderline. And Roero is this small piece of soil very close to Barolo and Barbaresco. We're located on the left side of the river Tanaro, who's the river who crossed the city of Alba. While on the other side, on the right side, there's Barolo and Barbaresco. These three wine regions are the most important wine region in the lower part of Piemonte, and they're so close. So close is between 20 to 30 minutes driving. But there's a huge difference between Roero and Barolo and Barbaresco, so the Langa region. And the biggest reason is the soil. The soil in Roero is rich in sand. We have a lot of seashells and fossils, a lot of minerals that then you taste on the wines.
But do you actually find that stuff in the vineyard?
We do.
Yeah.
We have some samples over there.
So cool.
A lot of old oysters, and right in Nasti, which is very close to here, a few years ago was found a huge whale skeleton.
Get out,
So
really?
it's amazing. All this area of Piemonte was below the ocean a million of years ago, and Roero was one of the last part of this area to emerge out of the ocean. So
Called the Gulf of Padano, right?
Exactly.
So the sea receded after Barolo and Barbaresco had
Exactly.
already come out of that.
Exactly.
They were also covered. Parts of it was covered.
All of it
was covered.
actually.
Okay.
They emerged out of the ocean between 10 to 30 million years ago, while Roero it's between 2 to 3 million years ago. So since we are way younger, we still have a good layer of sand, which is the seabed. while Barolo, especially a few parts of Barolo, like the southern part of it, the sand is almost gone because of the erosion, because it's so old, and so they have an older soil which is richer in clay.
How far down do you have to go to find the shells? Like, are they right at the top? Or?
They are right at the top.
Really?
They're right at the top. We have a vineyards. Actually, we have like a big hill behind the winery. We have like a vein of sand and seashells popping up really from the first part for the surface of the dirt, which is always so fun to see it because it's unbelievable. If you don't see it, you don't really believe it. But that's how
it's like
is.
being at the beach.
Exactly, the same. We don't have the sea anymore, but still, it's
You
the
have your
Italian
own
Riviera.
Cinque Terre beach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. The Tanaro, which is the river that divides you from Barbaresco and Barolo, it changed course like 250,000 years ago.
Exactly.
And that also did something to this area. So it's really the roque, right? That's what it formed.
Exactly.
Okay, explain what the roque is.
You did your homework, right?
You know, I try. I try not to show up and embarrass myself too much.
That's fun. Yeah, it's all true. About 250,000 years ago, the Tanaro River changed the direction. And it's fun because right before the Tanaro was going through Roero, right, from south to north, the Tanaro River was in Roero region. Then this sudden change made a big, like a kind of canyon, if you want, which is not stone, but it's rich in sand and a little clay as well. You can find it now right on the heart of Roero. We call it Roque, which is essentially the old direction, the old bed of the Tanaro River. And now this canyon is amazing because you have 100 meters of elevation from the base part to the top part of it. There is this amazing cliff, super wild, a lot of trees. And actually it's a very difficult part of Roero to find a vineyards where you can cultivate physically vineyards. We are very lucky. We have a big vineyards in there. It's called Rocche d'Amsei. So Rocche is the name in Italian, and Rocche d'Amsei is the name of our wine. And Rocche is the micro area, so the seabed of the Tanaro River, and Amsei is the name of the location. It's great. It's a very different soil than normal Roero because you always find a little bit more clay than normal. And the reason is because during the change of the direction of the river, the clay that we have here, clay, but you have to go very deep, like too deep for the roots, was brought on the surface because of the erosion. So the Rocche is the only area of Roero where it's still classified as a sandy soil, but still we have like 5-6% of clay that usually we don't have in the normal Roero.
So you're going to grow reds there, right?
Exactly. We do Nebbiolo.
Here's maybe a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So there's sand in the area. It's still eroding. So does it blow around at all? Like, do you find that your soil type can change? Can it become more sandy? You know, there's this soil type called loess. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They have a lot of it in Austria.
Yeah.
There's some of it in the United States also, especially in Washington. And it changes the character of the wine. It's usually silt that blows around, but I wonder, is the sand ever blowing or not really?
Not really. It's a very thin sand, but still it's not really blowing around. We still have though some difficulties in how we grow the vineyards because the erosion here is crazy. So now you have to always keep a nice grass right in the vineyard, so the roots of the little plants are keeping together the soil, the dirt. Especially with the global warming, we see more and more tropical style storm. So we get a lot of water. We call it in Italia bomba d'acqua, so like a water bomb. You get so much water at the same time, but since it's coming so fast, it doesn't really go into the dirt, but it just runs down the hill, bringing with it a lot of dirt. And so sometimes you have like huge holes in the vineyards, and the only way to fight it is always keep some grass, some covering crop.
It doesn't matter if it rains during the growing season, if it's just going to run off.
Exactly.
But one thing I will say is that since I was here in 2019, I am shocked at how many more vineyards there are on the valley floor in the Langa. People are getting desperate for land. Is that what's going on? Because that's not good. That's all really fertile.
Yeah.
Have you noticed this at all?
I
you
did.
right? Yeah.
But even if you have a look at Barolo, Serra, and Roero, you see how Roero is so much wilder. It's not all about vineyards like on the other side of the river. There's a lot of fruit trees. Actually, the best white truffles are coming from Roero because the white truffles needs oak trees. So woods, forest, a lot of hazelnuts, some fruits. Actually, Canale, which is the village where we are now, is very famous for peaches. We have a particular breed of peach, which should be more tasty than normal peaches. So yeah, Roero, it's not that famous as Barolo and Barbaresco yet, I would say.
Well, I think the arnaze is getting you there. We'll talk about that in a second. But this is a really interesting topic because when you go to Barolo and Barbaresco, and if you've never been there and you're listening to this and you're like, well, I've never been there, it doesn't matter. If you look at pictures, you can see this just as easily. It's all vineyards.
Exactly.
There's very few patches of woods. And I think in the past, people have been like, oh, it's polyculture. There's more than one thing growing and they grow a lot of stuff and it's wild, right? That's another thing people will say about Roero. And now the trend is, you hear about people in Bordeaux planting more trees and trying to find new flowers and trying to plant.
Biodiversity.
You're already here. You're already here. So all of the things that you've been criticized for are much better for the land. Do you kind of laugh at that now and think, haha?
Yeah, it's like, it's coming back, right? It's like karma, It's biodiversity is one of the most important point of our philosophy as Matteo Correggia Winery, because we know, scientifically speaking, that in a biodiverse environment, every single part of the environment, it's stronger. In our case, is the vines. So if the vines are stronger, we have to treat even less than before. So especially being organic, we always spend a lot of time and study and money as well to find out what's better. We always plant different flowers, different plants in the vineyards, so the insects will come to pollinate. It's crazy in this part of the season, period of the year, May, June, where everything is blossoming. You see the bee coming naturally.
There are so many bees and butterflies and things. Yeah,
bees are one of the most important air pollution indicator, and if you see it there naturally, it's amazing. You're going towards the same direction. So we like when you make a hole in your vineyards, you see stuff moving. That's the best way. The best thing you want to see in a vineyard.
It has to be alive. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
yeah, as opposed to
alive. Worms and little bugs and insects. It's so important for the vineyards, for the earth in general, but in our case, for the vines.
We're going to get into the history of the family and how everything evolved here, but why have you been so strong about organics? Your family is very, very strong about organics. Your dad started at least doing sustainability, but you and your mom and your sister is also in the business, right? She's
not actively involved, but
yes.
Yeah.
But you and your mom are the heart of the business, and you have really continued to push on this. Why is it so important to you?
It might be almost selfish because we did it almost first for ourselves, because I grew up upstairs above the winery and we work here every day. So first it's for us and our colleagues. We don't want to breed chemistry. Mm-hmm. So it's a change that we did officially in 2014. I'm saying officially because in 2014 is where we applied for the certification, and if you speak with people, everyone is organic. But then when you go at the bottom of it and you see what's your paper proving it, it's But that's why I'm saying officially from 2014, we said, let's try to be as natural as possible, because the world needs it, our health needs it, and the customer as well. So in 2014, we started the changeover to get organic.
How many producers in Roero are following the actual organic regimen? I mean, I understand there's sometimes the paperwork and the size of a winery makes it, you had to go through a lot to get an organic certification, right? There's a lot of administration.
A lot
of
paperwork.
Some really small wineries, they can't do it. It's just, even if they work organic, it's too hard. The larger ones don't really have an excuse. You're right. But do you think that other people in Roero are doing that? Are they actually moving towards certification?
It's growing.
Do they care?
Yes, it's growing. More and more people are really into organic, which is a great sign. It might be even just a feeling, but probably more than Barolo as well.
Yeah.
So that's a good part of Roero that I see more and more people. Our average price of bottle is way lower. It's way lower than a bottle of Barolo. So if these people are making organic, are being organic certified and stuff like us, it's a really good sign. So I'm glad that something is moving more and more. So that's the right direction.
Do you think that some of the popularity of arnaze is helping fund more people?
Yeah, arnaze is so popular. It's helping Roero area. Like everyone comes here for the arnaze, and then while they're here, we open some Nebbiolos as well, some Roero red Nebbiolo, and so they start to know Roero as well. So arnaze is so important for this wine region.
We'll skip around a little bit here because I was going to ask you some more about the history, but I really would like to talk about arnaze. Can you describe why is it that grape took off here so much? I mean, it used to be used to attract birds away from Nebbiolo, and then it went away for a long time, and it was here that it was revived. How did that happen?
I'd say technology helped a lot. Arnaze is a white varietal. It doesn't have so much acidity, so understanding when it's the best moment to pick the grape is so important, especially with the global warming. If you want to make a good arnaze with a good natural acidity, and plus, have the chance to control the temperature is important, because arnaze, when it's still juice, it's so easy to get oxidated, so you might lose a lot of good smells. So imagine like back in the years where maybe there wasn't such huge knowledge about picking moments and you couldn't control the temperature, the risk of making a bad arnaze was very high. So probably that's why the reason at the beginning was used to sacrifice among Nebbiolo vines, so the birds would eat the arnaze instead of the Nebbiolo and stuff. So I think technology helped. Plus, everyone started to travel. Like Barolo producers are traveling since quite a long time ago, but Roero, it's way younger from this point of view as well. And traveling, just spreading the word around and let people taste the arnaze, which is so modern as it tastes, such crazy minerality. You can drink it paired with food or just as an aperitivo, like sipping it outside on your patio, right?
You really have the benchmark arnaze for Roero, I think. What would you say you look for when you're thinking about the arnaze? Now, you do some winemaking, you do some winemaking, and then you have a winemaker also. So exactly. You do both. Absolutely. So when you're thinking about the arnaze, what's the goal?
So the goal of arnaze is a nice arnaze with a good acidity, natural. We always split the harvest in at least 2 moments. Like the first one is very early in late August to get a lot of acidity, low alcohol, and crazy aroma. And then the second picking in September. We do some skin contact on the second one, so we get some more texture. And then we blend part 1 and part 2. How much is part 1 and how much is part 2 depends on the vintage. If it's very hot, the part 1 is going to be like higher in percentage compared to the second one. But it's kind of magic, because when you taste these 2 parts pair, they're both very bad. Because the first one is just so funny. Acid, so skinny, so straightforward. The second one, it's just flat, flabby. There's no acidity. So
I'm assuming you also don't like orange wine that much by itself.
I'm not a huge fan of
Me
orange
neither.
wine, no.
I think this is the funniest thing, because everyone has done skin contact, especially in Italy. It's a thing. I don't know if somebody would actually call your wines orange wines because you've had skin contact. No. I would not think so. But there's some Slovenian places that do skin contact for like 10 days and they call themselves orange wines. And that's not that long.
No, we do like about 7, 8, 9 days, but just on, I would say, 20% of the quantity. So you don't see orange color in our arnaze.
No, but if you wanted to sell it to an orange wine place, you just tell them you have orange wine. Just do it.
All right. Thank you for the tip.
Hey, no problem. All right, now we're going to go back. We will come back to the wines in a second, but people have been making wine here you said it was a new region, but they've been making wine here a really, really long time, along with all of the other things. On your website, you have all of this information about what the vineyards were from like the 1200s. How did you find that out? From old books? It's really interesting. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I haven't seen that anywhere else except from you guys.
Yeah, for us, it's very important when we say something, have a way to prove it. So there's Baldassare Molino, which is like a professor. He studied history, especially in this part of Piedmont. So with him, through books we found at the libraries, we could prove that still in 12th century or more than that, there was Nebbiolo in that vineyard. It's proved, and people were like paying a tax with wine or with some grape to the lord of the region. So
the Roero family.
Exactly.
Could you explain how Roero got its name? It's a little harder to say, but it's from a family, right?
Yeah. Originally from Asti, and so the name took from that family. Exactly.
One point, this is part of the challenge for Roero, I think, is that at one point because there are parts of Roero that are not as steep as what's outside here. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, what is that? I'll take a picture of it, and I will also put it in the show notes so people can see how ridiculously steep your vineyard is. But there are some flatter parts. So there was bulk wine production here for a long time. Is there still bulk wine production here? Because I think that was probably a bit damaging to the reputation of Roero, because it's like local people wind up shooting each other in the foot here, as we say in America. You would think that producers across the river would also want Roero to do quite well, but they're like, oh, that's a bulk region, forget it. And then when it starts to do well, then they get jealous and they all start making arnaze. So,
I think there's always like a competition, which is good because it always keeps you on the right step in between Roero and Langa. I might say that some producer from Barolo, they're kind of scared of Roero, because if you think about Roero, today we make more modern wine, more approachable wine, that usually is what now the average customer wants. It's a better quality price, because since Roero is not Barolo as a fame, the price is lower, but the quality is getting better and better every year. There's a lot of organic going on, as we talked before. So it's kind of scary. I'm so happy and glad. I always hope that Barolo and Barbaresco will do best, because if Roero is getting more and more famous, we get so many tourists in here, it's because we are so close to them. So I'm happy Barolo is only 20 minutes, 25 minutes from here, because tourism is going there. And then after a while, after 2-3 days, they want to discover something new, and they just cross the river and they come here.
Tell us about your family. Your family has always been in the Roero area, or did they come from outside?
So the family from my dad's side always been here, and he grew up in this house, in this winery.
Wow.
Always been here forever. While my mom is coming from Langa, but from what we call the Alta Langa. Alta Langa is like all the hills around Barolo and Barbaresco, way higher in elevation.
Like Diano? Like that kind of
Diano,
stuff? Okay, all right,
that's
got it.
The beginning of it,
Okay.
yes. Towards Montelupo, Cortemiglia, all these places where now they're getting more and more popular, because
sparkling wine is huge there.
The DOCG, Alta Langa, it's great. I mean, with global warming, there's amazing good Alta Langa from those areas, and it's super wild. A lot of wild boars and deers, a lot of woods. So it's completely different area than the real Langa. Actually, if you speak with my mom, the real Langa is the Alta Langa. It's not the Barolo Barbaresco, but still, it's so different than Barolo and Barbaresco era. So the most known Langa.
Okay, that's really interesting, because that's probably the future of Nebbiolo too. Let's face it.
A lot of Nebbiolo.
If things start warming up, they're going to have to start moving up there. Okay, so when your father decided to make wine with the land that he inherited from his father, he was like 23 years old or something like that. He was even younger than you are. So is that where the winery is now, or did he inherit other parcels?
No,
it was
it's
here.
mainly here.
So the estate. When he was 23 in 1985, he started to make huge changes to the property. You were not even alive at this point, but I'm sure that you have heard the history. So it is pretty amazing to me that he was able to make wines that attracted Elio Altare and Roberto Guerzi. Like, how did that happen? This little producer in Roero, that all of a sudden now it was like, oh, this guy's doing some cool stuff. Don't you think that's kind of unusual in 1985, when you had Robert Parker just starting to find Barolo, and your dad, well, we'll talk about him being part of the Barolo Boys, which is the non-Barolo boy.
The outsider. Fun story, because my father was always been very, how can I say in English, like when he wants to reach something,
goal-oriented. Or I sometimes say to my husband that he was very stubborn, will not back down.
Exactly. It's a mix of those. Exactly. Very stubborn, and that was very important of his person. And thanks to that, he, even when at the real beginning he was just mainly selling grapes, he was cultivating the grape like he was about to make itself the best wine in the world, right? So the quality was very high. And actually, one day Roberto Guerzo came up at the winery, because at that time he was making some arnaze, and my dad was selling.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Was selling the grape to him. And he was like, you're so young, so talented, why you don't make your own wine? And probably that was the sparkle. The thing that said, okay, I should try. After this guy that was already famous at that time, I should do it. And so then happened, he was involved in the Barolo Boys group. So it was always been the outsider because we never had Barolo's properties. Still today we don't have Barolo properties, but still he was in that group, and he had the chance to learn a lot thanks to them. That group was very good because
who was in that group? I think people always want to know who was part of the Barolo Boys. I mean, Elio Altare was like the really leader.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there was Giorgio Rivetti from La Spinetta, Chiara Boschis, my dad, Corino, Corino's brothers. It was a pretty big group with all young producers, same age. And the nice thing is that they were tasting wines each other in order to learn more about vinification. Like, I just did this on this wine, taste it, what do you think? Oh wow, I like it, what did you do? That was very important to build your knowledge up faster than just being alone, right?
Do you think they anticipated it was a pretty bad time for Barolo, because in the end it turned out to be a pretty aggressive fight. And I've told this story, I'm sure, on a podcast before, but I visited, I'm not going to say who it was, but I visited a very traditional producer who still to this day doesn't want to see press and is very wary of people because of that time when people just said, oh, your winery's dirty or horrible. I'm sure it wasn't the Barolo people themselves, but the critics. But all of that has died down. It's not a problem now. But what do you think about that period of history?
I loved it. I loved it because
forget those people.
I don't really care about Barrique or Big Botti, whatever. There's amazing wines in both sides, so I don't really care. But I'm so happy that happened because I think that fight was so important because all the media start to talk about Piemonte.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's still like some video.
No PR is bad PR,
exactly,
as they say.
Exactly.
Right?
And so there's still like a lot of videos on YouTube, like Elio Altare against Bartolo Mascarello talking on like a show, talking about modern against the Big Botti and traditional and stuff. And today, probably we are kind of coming back. New oak is kind of left behind. We did a big change. I would say in 2010 was the first year that we started to change. I prefer more elegant wine, but I'm conscious that if you want to go on, we don't have to be stuck. We have to be dynamic and go on and follow the market, follow your own taste. Thanks God, I love this taste, so I'm happy we're making way lighter wine than before, speaking about oak side. And I think almost everyone is going towards that direction. But
I totally agree.
But still, I'm so happy that fight happened. It was so strong because especially that was so important for U.S. market. Because before that, U.S. Piedmontese wine in U.S. market was something that never happened before.
I think the greatest thing that might have happened also is that in the end, even the traditional producers learned something. Like, I think if it wasn't in the winery necessarily, it might have been in the vineyard, because there were also vineyard techniques. I think everybody talks about the Barrique, but actually there were things that were very important that evolved out of that, and I think that made the wine better.
Yeah, let's talk like about the bunch thinning. Like the modern guys, so the Barolo Boys, were doing a very important and aggressive bunch thinning that at that time probably was very important because the weather was colder, so it was almost impossible to reach the perfect ripeness on every single grape on the vine. So like do what we call the green harvest. It's very important. Today with the global warming, we're kind of going back. You cannot do such strong bunch thinning as before because it's too warm. You reach like 17-80% of alcohol as a wine.
That's horrible.
So it's like we're kind of going backwards compared 20-30 years ago, but that's because of the global warming.
The other thing that Matteo was very ahead on was the slow food movement. I just went to Banco del Vino. I know that you're part of that, which is the big bank of all of the wines of Italy. And that is a really progressive move too. It's also kind of odd because it's like the opposite of the Barolo Boys. So it's kind of this funny thing where were you one of the first wineries in Roero to be organic?
Yeah, for sure.
And does that relationship with slow food
probably
it help? Yeah, I mean,
it's slow food is a very important movement for Italy, not just from Piemonte, and so be part of this movement is very important. You have to be open-minded and not just focus on one single thing, but be more open and do more than one at the same time.
It's just great. You can hold two ideas
Yeah.
at the same time. And then the other thing that the winery was very progressive on was putting a vineyard on the label of Roero, which really no one had done before either, which kind of just said, you know what? We also have great vineyards here, so forget you. I got to thank everybody who has gone on to winespies.com/normal, wine, spies.com/normal, and taken a look around. Right now on the store page, which you can find at the bottom of the homepage, you will find some amazing wines that I recommend. There is a Premier Cru from Santenay, a 2018 from Justin Girardin, which is an amazing wine. It's $40. I don't know where you're going to find a Premier Cru anywhere else for that kind of money. It is awesome. There's a Godello, which if you haven't had that kind of wine, it is fantastic, and a Bandol Rouge, a special cuvee. And you can get this all on the store page from the Wine Spies. This is a special feature of Wine Spies because normally they are a flash sale, one deal per day site. They're not a wine club. You buy what you want, when you want, at up to a 75% discount. They take the guesswork out of finding a great bottle. And I have done that too by recommending this stuff on the store page. Every single day, they're going to offer you a new wine. You have no obligation to buy. And the greatest thing, which I mention all the time, is the build a case feature. The locker. That's going to allow you to try a wide variety of wines and get free shipping on everything. Save those bottles in your locker. When you get 12, they ship it to you for free. Visit winespies.com/normal. You get a $20 credit on your first order. winespies.com/normal. I also want to say a quick note. Last week, I took 18 patrons on a trip to Piedmont. Almost every single person on this trip was a patron, and our relationships before we went were so deep because we have an amazing community of people. These people, after the trip, not only did they know each other from online, they got to know each other on the trip, and it couldn't have gone better. At the end of the trip, everybody said that they wanted to go on another trip, but only if they got to go with the other patrons that were on that trip. What does that say to you? If you want to join an amazing community, this is it. Get to know the people who are on Patreon. Get to know these people as friends. And when we have live events, you will already have a community. It is so hard to find this in this day and age, but the Wine for Normal People Patreon community is a real thing. And there's so much information on there. Things you'll never see on Instagram or Facebook. I barely use social media anymore. Patreon is where I post everything. I think that from now on, we'll only be offering trips to patrons, and I couldn't be happier about it. Those relationships were already there and in place, as I said, and it made the trip all the better. Join the community, see what you're missing out on. You won't regret it, I promise. And don't forget, winefornormalpeople.com/classes. Keep checking back because I'm telling you, I'm going to launch the classes for the summer. Just get on them because there could be stuff that I offer only during the summer. I usually offer some funky stuff during the summer just for super wine dorks. So check it out. With that, let's get back to this amazing podcast with Giovanni. I hope that you enjoy it. Talk about the label in general, because you have this wonderful label that has a pretty special story also.
Yeah, the label was made by a good friend of us. He's a painter, originally from Uruguay. He moved in Italy a long time ago. His name is Coco Cano. That's a fun story because my dad was very friend with Carlin Petrini, the president of the slow food movement. Back in the years when he was about to bottle his first vintage, he was like, I done everything, but I still need a label. You have an idea or something? And Carlin Petrini pointed my dad to this guy, Coco Cano, who just made an incredible, beautiful label for slow food. But slow food turned it down because it wasn't really filling the concept of the event they were looking for.
Said they went with a snail. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, exactly. And it was like an event, and they needed a logo and stuff. So Carlin loved this logo, but it wasn't really fitting the event. And so my dad went to Coco Cano, and they just fell in love with each other's idea. And since the beginning, we had this 2 hill with the sun. And the last restyling was done 3-4 years ago, and Cococano was still involved in it, doing a little new project as well as a kind of wine club and stuff. And this guy Cococano was again involved with all the graphic part of it.
It's so pretty and so different and positive. It's a very positive label, don't you think?
Yeah, I like colors. So in the last restyling, every single label has at the bottom of it a part which is preach in colors. And that is a part of 4 big paintings that this painter made. And we just took a part of it and placed it underneath every single bottle. It's always different.
It's that color strip, right?
Exactly,
Yes, yeah,
exactly.
It's so neat. So yeah, when you pick up a bottle of Matteo Correggia wine, take a look because it's there every time. I know exactly what you're talking about. They do drink a lot of your wine. Okay, so your father unfortunately passed in 2001, and your mom, Ornella, I mean, you were a little kid at the time, so your mom had to figure out what to do. Did she think about selling the land, or she just decided, I'm doing this? She kind of kicks some serious butt, doesn't she?
Yeah. She decided to keep it in order to give me and my sister a chance in the future, to take over and do our own stuff. So
did she have any experience doing farming or anything? Your mom kind of kicks butt.
My very brave decision.
Women were not doing a lot
Especially
of
by
that stuff.
then,
even
yeah.
I mean, even in 2001, you just didn't see that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, my mom studied to be like a kids teacher, and then she'd be working for a while like in an insurance company. So never had anything to do with farming.
That is totally amazing. I mean, do you just look at her and think, gosh, you really,
Absolutely.
I mean,
So
besides
proud.
being grateful,
So
but she
proud.
really took the reins, and
She did.
instead of just keeping it at steady state, she kept pushing.
Exactly.
And made it ready for when you were really ready to come in.
I gotta say that at the real beginning, we had a lot of helps from producer, from the Barolo Boys, for instance. They came physically at the winery in the vineyards to work. So my dad
That is so awesome.
Yeah, my dad passed away in June, which is probably the most difficult month for vineyards work. And so the day after the funeral, like all producers, they were in that vineyards there. We see it from here working physically. And that was a huge help. And even in winemaking, Giorgio Rivetti helped us a lot at the beginning of our history after my dad. And this communion, it's still today, my mom is so proud. We're so thankful towards those people because without them, we probably couldn't do it. We couldn't do it.
That's one of the things that I love so much about wine communities, that people show up for each other. They don't just forget and say that's your problem.
No.
So, but Luca Rostana was already here. He's your winemaker who you're learning from.
Yeah.
That must have helped also because he had already learned from your dad, right?
Yeah, but consider that he been working with my dad for like 10 months.
Oh, that's it?
So he came like in August 2000 and my dad passed away in June 2001. So it was
my gosh.
so short. And he was, I'd say 21, 22 by then. So very, very young.
Wow.
And it's still with us. So he's a bit more than 40, but he already did 23 vintages harvest with us. We don't count years, we count harvest.
Right, of course.
Right?
That's of course
And,
how it goes.
Yeah, it's a good team. All very young.
That's a tough position to be in too, but he's done a great job. So I personally feel like all of this is just setting it up for you in many ways, which is fantastic. Did you always want to get involved in the winery? Do you remember being a little kid? I mean, I know you grew up in the vineyard right here, but did you think to yourself, I want to do that? Or did you think, I definitely do not want to do that?
It just happened. I think still today, sometimes I wonder what I would do if it wasn't wine. And honestly, I don't really have a proper answer, I would say. But it's been like growing up in vineyards or just during the harvest time through the window, see these guys working till late, made me wonder why these guys are like smiling. It's like 11 p.m. and they're working like crazy. And tomorrow in a few hours, they're going to be here again. Because I know I'm waking up for school and see they're already here, why they're still, smiling and, spreading good vibes. And so that probably was why I just went straight forward. Actually, fun story. My mom, in order to avoid that one day I could point my finger at her and say, you pushed me to do that and stuff, she pushed me to do like a normal scientific lyceum while I was willing to do the winemaking school. And I didn't listen to her, so I did winemaking school. That was a good pick. Sometimes being stubborn and not listening to your mom.
Okay, well,
it's
maybe your
helpful.
mom should you just tell her that you were just trying to follow the same thing she did, right?
Exactly,
She
exactly.
did, she was stubborn and so were you. So there you go. You're her kid. What does she expect?
Right?
Yes.
Nothing
But I mean,
else.
you have all of this. So I think it would be hard to some people walk away from it, but you have all of this beauty and this great thing. And I think the other thing about what you do is you're not just in the fields, you do so much of the business side too, and you get to travel. And so I think that probably makes it interesting too, especially for a young guy. You don't want to be trapped. But you spent some time in Australia. Talk about that.
I did. Yes, I
Yeah.
did. Back in 2014,
Where's your Australian accent? Can you do it?
I lost it. I could do it sometimes, from time to time. When I go there, because sometimes I go back, we have an importers there.
Oh, fun!
And so not really often, but sometimes
it's a long trip.
It's
Let's
a long
face
trip.
it, yeah.
It's a very long trip, but still, I love Australian accent. It's impossible to understand, but still, I love it.
It must be really hard.
But yeah, I was there in 2014. I've been working in Barossa Valley in a winery, and I did all the harvest season.
Which one?
Kellermeister.
Yeah.
Which is Mark Pierce is the owner. It's a very good winery. Like,
they make Rhone varietals though, right? Or
yes,
Bordeaux?
Yes.
Okay, what was that like? Because that's so different from anything here.
So different and so hot and dry. So not just the varietal, even the weather is extremely different, hot and dry. The
diurnals, yeah. It gets very cold at night there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Discovered different varietals, how they made those wines, big wines, like 15-16% of alcohol. And
do you think that being there helped you understand drought at all? Because historically, this area has not had problems with that. And now here you are in the summertime hurting for water.
Yeah, well, they
can irrigate.
They can irrigate,
it's totally
so
different.
It's totally different. And by then, probably I wasn't really conscious about the global warming as well. It's completely different than here.
Okay, so you manage 20 hectares, 49 acres. And then you have these single vineyard things that we talked about before. And we talked about the arnaze. So you have your flagship arnaze, and then you have a vineyard designated arnaze. And then you have Nebbiolo, which this is the most frustrating thing to me. I said it on the Roero podcast. I said it to you the last time I met you. So Roero it's like Barolo and it is like Barbaresco in that it's a place appellation. But the problem is Roero says arnaze on the arnaze and does not say the other grape that it actually represents, which is Nebbiolo on the bottle. And you can't put it anywhere on the bottle. So unless you listen to this podcast right now, you might not know that Roero, when it says that, is in fact Nebbiolo. Let's talk about how Nebbiolo is different in Roero. There's a big contrast, and you're exactly right. This is, given what you said about the soil type, given where people are with what they prefer to drink these days, this is the style. So talk about this. And then you don't just have one style of Nebbiolo, because Nebbiolo doesn't work like that.
Yeah, the Nebbiolo from Roero, it's always more elegant, more approachable. But approachable doesn't mean simple, because especially if we focus on single vineyards, those are Nebbiolo that you can drink them tonight with a good meat or good meal, but you can drink it in 10, 15, 20 years as well. So they have a crazy good aging potential, but still are different because they are more elegant, more approachable, slightly higher acidity because of the sandy soil, even lighter color as well. So they're quite different, Nebbiolo, compared to our neighbors in Barolo or Barbaresco area. Nebbiolo from Roero can take the appellation of Roero DOCG or, unfortunately, Langhe Nebbiolo DOC. I'm saying unfortunately because Langhe Nebbiolo DOC, it might be very good for your pocket, for your wallet, but it's not good for the area because you're going to read on the label Langhe, which is not Roero. Langhe is on the other side of the river, and Nebbiolo. So thanks to Langhe Nebbiolo, it's easier to sell because everyone knows Langhe, everyone knows Nebbiolo varietal. But you're making like an advertisement for your neighbor, not for yourself. And there's so many good Langhe Nebbiolo made in Roero, but they don't help our territory because they are helping Langhe.
It's bizarre to me because you have Bruno Giocosa, a big Barbaresco producer. He makes Roero Arnaze. He's happy to put that on the bottle. And people are happy to put it on the bottle for Arnaze. And yet when it comes to Nebbiolo, they're not happy to put it on the bottle. So you'll build the appellation with arnaze, but you won't do it with Nebbiolo? Is that I don't understand the logic. It doesn't make sense.
Me neither. We're one of the few wineries that makes for Nebbiolo only Roero. So we don't do any Langhe Nebbiolo, Nebbiolo d'Alba, nothing like that. Probably they're not the perfect exact numbers, but just more or less the total production of Nebbiolo made in Roero is close to 7-8 million bottles, but only 480,000 are Roero appellation.
What?
Yeah, I know. That's crazy. That makes me so frustrated because I used to travel. I travel quite a lot and I go around trying to talk about Roero and stuff. But sometimes you feel almost stupid because you're talking about something that almost doesn't exist. We are billions of people on this world. And we're talking about something which is less than 500,000. But
it's not. That's what's so crazy.
Exactly. We could have the potential to reach 7-8 millions, which would be important because we want to be smaller. We don't want to be like Prosecco, like so many bottles.
Chianti even.
Chianti. Exactly. But still, we have to reach a certain point to talk about it because we have 20 hectares as well, so 49 acres, and we make in total more than 65,000 bottles of Roero, just us, right?
Wow.
And it's so frustrating because you really realize that you're talking about nothing sometimes. And so I think when producer will change, hopefully will happen soon, so more Langhe Nebbiolo will become Roero, that will be the sparkle to light up the rocket we are sitting on.
I mean, you are sitting up because people like lesser known appellations, especially if a restaurant is looking for something different. They sometimes don't want the Langhe because that's everywhere. Everybody has that now. So exactly. I hope people will wake up because it is kind of dumb, isn't it? There's appellations like, if you look at all the Dolcetto appellations, they're fighting to get Dolcetto taken off the name and just turn into the name. They just want to be Diano or Ovada. They don't want the Dolcetto D because usually that means that it's an everyday wine. You have that.
We have that. And I agree with you. We already seen Roero arnaze. We've been working on that. And now it's kind of famous varietal. People are asking for it. So we already seen that it works, so I don't really understand why, but money. I think producers should think not from January to December, but from January to December of 2026, right?
Yeah, because, the future looking.
If everyone would move from Langhe Nebbiolo to Roero, they might have maybe in the first couple of years some difficulty into sales, but after that, boom, you go like crazy.
I don't know. These days, it could be Nebbiolo from a tree and people would like it. It doesn't matter. People love Nebbiolo. It's so popular now.
There's a lot of producers that when I speak about Langhe Nebbiolo to Roero, they say, but your name is Correggia. And I'm like, okay, you're right. My name is Correggia. But my dad at the beginning, my mom always tell that when he started making good wines, like wining with more studying, more skin contact, and all this stuff, like more seriously. He had the barrels in the cellar, but he didn't have tables, armchairs for the real. They got married in 1990, and the beginning, for a few months, they were eating with the dish on her or on their lap.
I actually have done that while remodeling a house. I understand that.
Exactly. So that means a little sacrifice, but today it won't be like that. You may be struggling a little bit to sell 1 or 2 years, but then after that, it's going to be
But how do you
easier.
even know that's true? We don't even know that's true because no one will try it. You know what I'm saying? Your theory is that you would struggle to sell Roero, but if you could convince people to say it's Nebbiolo, not you personally, but some new producer or some smaller producer, if they just put Roero on it and then told people that it was 100% Nebbiolo, we don't know what would happen. We don't actually know if it would be a struggle. It could just be like, okay, that's great.
Absolutely.
This is a new appellation. This is
true.
fantastic, especially if they could ever go together as a consortium. Yeah. And it drives me crazy. But okay, talk about your single vineyards. How do they differ? In Barolo and Barbaresco, they talk about the MGAs, and you have MGAs here too, right?
Sí.
All of the specific differences. In Roero, the sandy soils are prevalent everywhere. So what are the differences in La Val de Preti versus just your regular Roero?
Yeah, the Roero, the sand is prevalent, but still there are differences.
Okay.
The differences in terms of quantity. Somewhere the sand is very thin, like talco. Somewhere else it's just a little bit bigger, so elevation, exposure. So there's big differences in the Roero as well, single vineyards. We do have MGA since a few years ago, so it's something that came in Roero just a few years ago. We are not really using MGA, unfortunately, because our 3 single vineyards, Barbera and Nebbiolos, are on the market since 1987, and we used name related to the vineyards, but it's not exactly the same of the MGA.
Why didn't they ask you? They asked other people. I was at the Produttore del Barbaresco earlier. They asked them when they were making the MGAs. That's a little nuts. You're one of the most prominent producers here.
It might be like even complicated to make everyone happy. Like, let's say Val dei Preti. Val dei Preti is this vineyard which is right above the winery. It's called Val dei Preti because there used to be priests there a long time ago making Nebbiolo and arnaze. So it's a very historical area for wine growing. But still, it's just the vineyards, while the MJ that covers Val dei Preti is quite big. It's called Anime, if I'm not wrong, which is the name of the little district in here. It wouldn't be correct to call all that MGA Val dei Preti because it would be too big.
Yeah, but they cut up plenty of other stuff across the river. They could have just given you that. Lots of people over there have their own monopole MGA. Monopole, so, yeah. So you make 3 Nebbiolo, right?
Yeah.
So what's the third one? Talk about.
We make 4.
Oh, you make 4. Okay, so tell us about all of them.
We have the entry level. It's called Roero. One is called Val dei Preti, super sandy soil, a lot of seashells, more played on the elegance and freshness, like long aftertaste. And the third one is Roque d'Amsei, which is a Roero Reserva from Roque area. So it's always more powerful, more balsamic smells, more mint, eucalyptus. So it's quite different. And when you blind it, among Barolo, especially from La Morra side, so the sandiest part of Barolo, it's not that easy to pick. And then we make a fourth one, which is a recent wine. My sister and I wanted to dedicate a wine in honor to our dad. And I took care with Luca about the vinification. We made Nebbiolo 100% in amphora.
Oh, that's so
cool.
Both
skin contact, fermentation, and aging after that. So it always stays in there. We don't use any oak and any stainless steel.
How did you find working with the amphora? Was it
great?
Yeah,
great.
It lets a lot of air in without the oak flavor, right? It's probably great for Nebbiolo.
It's perfect for Nebbiolo. In amphora, there's like 1,000 of different of them. It depends how long they cook the amphora in the oven, but ours
pottery,
so there's huge transpiration. And my sister made the label of that wine, so if you see the complete lineup from Matteo Correggia, that is the only one which is quite different because my sister made it. This wine, it's called Apapa. It's not Roero because since we don't use any oak, we cannot call it Roero by the law.
What is the oak requirement on Roero?
6 months minimum. We could have called it Langhe Nebbiolo, but would be so stupid.
You're not going to do that.
So it's just Vino Rosso, so red wine. That's it. It's a tiny production.
So it's a table wine? Because there's no IGT wines here,
it's
right? You're not allowed to, or IGP rather. You're not allowed to use that. That's one of the interesting things about Piedmont. There's no IGP.
No IGP.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you wish there was?
No, I don't care.
You're not going to
That wine is just like 400 bottles. Not cases, but bottles. Is super tiny, and people buying that, they know what's inside, so I don't really care about the appellation. I wish I could call it Roero, but the appellation says no, and I'm fine with it.
Oh, I'd like to go to one of your meetings one time. I have some things to say to them. All right, talk about your Barbera and the Maroon vineyard, which has a funny name. There's some history there, and talk about how the Barbera is different here also, because that's another grape that I think has changed its character completely with the climate change. It used to be that you would get Barbera d'Alba and it was soft and nice, and now it's so full-bodied that you are looking at things that are 15% alcohol, oftentimes with a lot of oak on them.
Yeah. The thing about Barbera is while, let's say, Nebbiolo has sugar level and ripeness, the phenolics, they go at the same speed. On Barbera, the sugar level goes faster than the phenolic.
But it never loses acidity, so at least you have that going for you.
But the thing is that we could make Barbera with less than 15% of alcohol, but the grape wouldn't be ripe. And so the wine wouldn't be balanced. With higher acidity too much and still green because the phenolic is not there yet. So I always said Barbera probably originally might be like a Mediterranean varietal because loves warm and dry. That's it. So with the global warming, despite the alcohol that is going higher and higher, still we're making better and better Barbera. Barbera has to be in the perfect spot. Maroon is located on the top of the hill, which is super windy, which is very good because the humidity is not good for Barbera. So the wind rides out the humidity when you have the dew in the morning, or the wind, or just the rain. Normal rain is very important, the wind. Plus, Barbera is a super vigorous varietal. If you plant Barbera in a humid and rich soil, you're going to get so much grape, but you won't reach the perfect ripeness. So top of the hill in a super sandy soil is always the driest part of the hill. And a light water stress, it's so important on Barbera because it calms down the varietal, the plants, in terms of quantity, but you get way more concentration and you can reach the ripeness. Another interesting experiment that we did on Barbera that is working out so well is that instead of planting the vines like 90 centimeters, a little bit less than 1 meter, like usually we do, we plant the vines 45 centimeters.
I've been reading that a lot of people have been changing the spacing, making things more densely packed with good results, especially with climate change.
Yeah,
what does that do? Just competing more?
There's more competition for sure. I mean, Roberto Barezzo is doing that since ever, so we didn't discover something new. But on that, Barbera was a very good choice because the Vineyards is on the top of the hill, right next to Maroon, but still very rich. A lot of food, a lot of nourishment in the dirt. And so we just wanted to create more competition. And that was great because the grape of Barbera, they might be so heavy, huge. But in this case, they are so small, thicker skin, some more concentration, and they're always more balanced. That's it. So it's a matter of competition.
Oh, can you talk about the name of the vineyard?
Yeah, Maroon means in our dialect brown, Piedmontese dialect. And it's probably because a few owners before us, there was a guy that was particularly maroon. We say brown in Italian when someone has a very bad temper, bad character, it's a little like a bear, grumpy. So still today, there's the old people knowing that's the vineyards of Maroon, that's Maroon, that's Maroon. We don't have any documents about it. It's just...
it's oral tradition, right? You pass the stories on. The last grape I really want to talk about is Brachetto, which you make this pasito. I had it the last time I was here. It's unbelievably delicious. I mean, it's such a tradition. I'm so happy that you make it. What do you want people to know about Brachetto?
So Brachetto, as you said, is such a tradition. Before Roero started to make wine more in a serious way, Brachetto was everywhere because the wine farmers were making, it was mainly for self-consumption. So in November, they were picking the last grapes from Nebbiolo. In March, they were already drinking the wine. So the target was something not super rich in alcohol and easier to drink. So usually the blend was Nebbiolo to get tannins, Barbera to get color and acidity, and Brachetto that has this crazy flower aroma was making the final wine more approachable and more easy drinking. So they were mixing it. My granddad was one of the few, if not the only one, who at that time was already making 100% dry Brachetto. We kept the same tradition, plus after a while we added the Pasita as well. So we have one vineyard of Brachetto. We use a particular breed of Brachetto, which is Bracchettone, so the big Brachetto of Roero. Big because if you see the grape, it's super thin but huge, very, very long. And
the bunches are huge? Not the individual grapes, just the bunch is just enormous. So you get a lot of grapes that way, right? Show you a
picture later. Yes, it's crazy. This varietal was discovered in Roero. It's more difficult to grow compared to the classic Brachetto, but it's worth it because it has more aroma than the classic Brachetto. And on a wine like that, we really need the aroma. So from this vineyard in September, we pick all of the grape. A part of it go through the destemming and crushing machine. We do normal vinification and roller fermenter, like a normal red wine. And we make distilled and dry Brachetto, only stainless steel to keep all the aroma, which is amazing because you can pair that wine with anything. You go from seafood salad towards some light young cheese, spicy foods, wasabi. It's amazing. You can chill down a bottle as well, so drinking outside almost as a white wine temperature or drinking room temperature. It's so easy.
So versatile and so interesting. I wish more people would make it because it's very tasty. It's so unusual, though.
Especially in the US is the best market for that wine.
Oh, I'm sure. And, people are pretty adventuresome. And once they know your name, they're happy to try anything from Correggia.
So yeah, the Pasita is, we do the drying process in some fruit baskets. So we pick again in September.
Where do you dry it?
Just outside. We put it on pallets and fruit baskets so the wind can go through and help the drying. The drying process, since it's outside, is so natural. It might take 3 weeks, has 6 weeks, 7 weeks. It depends on the weather. And when we have enough sugar to have about like 11-12% of alcohol and about 100 grams of sugar per liter, we start the vinification and we make this wine. We always keep, this is a Pasito, so it's a sweet wine. But still, compared to normal Pasito, is always less sweet. It has less sugar and higher acidity, so it's even better to pair. And it goes from cheese till dessert. I love with dark chocolate. It's amazing.
That wine is just sinful. It's just so good. It shouldn't be that good. So you're pretty modern. I mean, you're modern and traditional at the same time. Screw cap. Let's discuss screw cap. You are literally the only appellation, I think. Well, maybe Asti is maybe looking at it now, that allows screw cap. I think that might be because of you. Is that true?
No, I think I just happened to be actually even classic Barolo with no MGA. They could be close with screw cap.
No one does it except you.
No one does it. Exactly.
I mean, you're not big Barolo, but Roero. It's awesome. I think it's the best thing ever, especially for the young wines.
Exactly. We've been trying the screw cap since 2008.
Is this from your time in Australia?
It was still Australia, but before me was Luca. He had his honeymoon in Australia. And then he found out these amazing wines with screw cap, so we said, let's try it. So in 2008, we did a lot of tries. But by then, the DOCG was only normal cork.
Could you even use fake cork? Normal cork, you could use that.
We could use that, but had to look as a cork. But in 2012, the law changed, so we already had some experience back. The screw cap was allowed, and we just jumped on a market on a few wines straight away. Today, we have the two arnaze 100% screw cap. The Brachetto is 100% screw cap. And the Roero is kind of half-half, because in Italy, it's still a little bit difficult on the red wines, the screw cap, but we'll get there eventually.
You probably could sell it in America, right?
Yeah, America, North Europe, Australia, Asia, actually everywhere except the old Europe.
That's okay. They can keep the tradition for a little longer. I think it makes sense. It keeps the wine so fresh. It's easy to have a picnic with a screw cap wine. It's so smart. I really do think you're such a good blend of forward-looking and past. All right, I'm going to ask you the Roero question. There's these 3 challenges that I see for Roero. No one knows it's Nebbiolo for the red. Mm-hmm. We're kicking butt with arnaze, so this is a good door opener, but nobody knows it's Nebbiolo. You have competition from Barolo and Barbaresco, and a lot of the people that are making wine, famous Roero arnaze, are not in Roero. They're in Barolo and Barbaresco, and they're sort of stealing the glory a little bit of this. Is that good for the region? Is that bad for the region? Obviously, it's arrived with arnaze. It's like one word. I think sometimes people think that Roero is the grape, honestly.
Yeah, sure.
It's like Roero. You're the flagship producer here. You've gotten bigger and stronger, and the brand has gotten stronger since I've seen you a couple years ago. But how do you get around the problem that you have all these producers that aren't even here? That's really confusing because you see Barbaresco and Roero arnaze and
I'm happy that people getting a grape or they have the fields here on white arnaze. They call it Roero arnaze and not Lang arnaze. So that's very important because I think that's one of the reasons that helped the arnaze varietal to be so known around, because if one is like Vietti and other good producer, Giacosa, etc., they use Roero arnaze. They sell it not expensive because Roero arnaze is not expensive, but still a bit more expensive than the average. It's better. I'm so happy. I wish they raise their price more and more every year because it's going to help all the region.
Vietti is pretty expensive for their arnaze. I mean, I think it's definitely going up in price. The land here is more affordable. So are there any young new producers, like friends of yours, who have come on the scene? Are you seeing some exciting things? Sometimes that's really great for an appellation too, is that it's a bunch of young producers and they're really hungry to hustle.
Yeah, I think Roero might be the future. I already heard a couple of very important entrepreneurs saying that because the land is more affordable, but the quality potential of here is amazing. So it's true. I wish people from Barolo would buy land in here because I totally agree what my dad was saying. My dad back in the 80s was like the fastest way to make Roero famous and known around the world would be like all the producers of the area, they put some euro, actually it was not euro yet, but still some money together.
Lira, yes.
They build a winery and they just give it to Gaia as a present. Gaia, the producer, as a present. With the obligation to use Roero appellation, of course. That's so true. I a lot of producers now are buying Timorasso. I'm glad for them, but I wish someone would invest in the Roero region because it will help like crazy, especially big names.
One really important thing is this idea of these younger people who can afford things, and they're less worried about the legacy and more excited about saying, well, I don't care whether you know this wine or not. It's awesome. And that really helps. And Matteo Correggia has been so steady with keeping on Roero. And there's really nobody else carrying that flag. It's such a thing to be proud of. I think you are.
Yes.
But if anybody knows a producer here, it's you. And that is outstanding because you're so dedicated. You love what you do. And I'm just so happy to know you. I'm really happy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to me. I'm so glad. Thank you.
And with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.